The orange Wargame Striker or Street Sweeper is a currently rare gel blaster with obvious applicability to Airsoft. It was first previewed in the latter half of 2020, but its manufacture coincided with a ban on gel blasters in China, which halted production. While at the time of making this video they're very difficult to acquire, there are signs that they resumed production and the guns will be available again soon. But we got a couple, so after extensive testing and modification, it's time for a review. So, let's start with the basic overview and operation. This is a gas and shell shotgun, so it uses shells. It's capable of accepting both the Tanaka shell design, which includes PPS, Mad Bull, SHS, and Shoguns, as well as the APS shell design. Either way, you'll need to supply your own shells. So to load the gun, opening the loading gate exposes the internal cylinder. After a shell is loaded, turning the winding key on the front indexes the cylinder to expose the next chamber. This process is repeated until all 12 chambers are loaded, at which point the gate is closed. The key can then be given a few extra cranks to ensure reliable function. With the crossbolt safety engaged, pulling the trigger only advances the drum. When the crossbolt safety is disengaged, pulling the trigger advances the drum and then fires a shell. Releasing the trigger allows it to advance to the next shell. To reload, the gate is opened and the manual ejector lever used to eject the shells. Because the last fired shell is the one under the loading gate, it is possible to top up the cylinder by opening the gate, ejecting the shell, loading a new one, and winding the cylinder one click. And you can repeat this process until the gun is fully loaded. Alternatively, excess spring tension can be used to cycle the gun on safe while ejecting shells, and once it's empty, then new shells can be loaded. That's really all there is to operating this gun. It's clunky, but straightforward. I should point out that this is a tiny shotgun, but as far as I can tell the scale's correct. It's 18.5 inches long, with just a slightly shorter barrel than the real one that counts for it being about 1.5 inches shorter. It weighs 4.6 pounds unloaded, which is a lot less than the real one for reasons we'll get into, so it's pretty light and handy. So now let's talk about the real Striker for context. The Armson Striker was a combat shotgun designed by Hilton Walker in South Africa in the early 1980s. After some success in the African market, the design was copied by the American Cobra company and renamed the Street Sweeper. Neither gun ever saw much commercial success or military use, but they have been prominently featured in movies and video games, so are pretty well known. A company called Sentinel Arms then resurrected the Striker design in the 2010s, combining the best features of each variant and adding some new improvements. The orange Wargame replica appears to be based on one of the early Sentinel Arms variants, and shows elements of both the Striker and Street Sweeper. So this appears to be an accurate replica of a Striker, just not the original Striker or its Cobra knockoff. But they're all close enough to one another that the differences are minor. So mechanically, it's an extremely simple gun and easy to take apart. First, the muzzle nut is unscrewed. With it gone, the shroud can now be pulled off, and then the barrel unscrewed from the frame. Next, the cylinder pin is removed. This takes a screwdriver to get started, but then it spins out. Simultaneously, it's necessary to repeatedly pull the trigger to avoid building up spring tension. Once the cylinder pin is unscrewed, the winding key must be unscrewed too, and the cylinder pin and winding key come out together. 4 hex screws are removed from the frame, and then the drum assembly can slide out and falls apart once it's out of the gun. Lastly, removing 3 hex screws from the grip allows the grip assembly to slide off the back of the frame. With the gun disassembled, it's easier to see how it works. The drum contains a torsion spring in the center, which indexes onto a flat section of the cylinder pin and provides the spring tension to rotate the cylinder. The cylinder itself has 12 spring-loaded cylinder stops. On the frame, an indexing pin protrudes from the middle of a shelf. This prevents the cylinder from aligning a shell perfectly to the barrel when it's at rest. When the trigger is pulled, this pin retracts, allowing the next cylinder stop to rotate into position. Pulling the trigger further then causes the firing pin to protrude, which triggers the valve on the shell. When the trigger is released, the indexing pin comes back out. It pushes the cylinder stop into the cylinder, allowing it to clear the shelf so that the cylinder may rotate. So this system accomplishes an effective revolver mechanism with very few moving parts. And while we're here, there's just one notable accessory for the gun, and that's the Armson Occluded Eye Gun Sight, or OEG, mounted to the top of the frame. This was designed specifically for the Striker, and is still in production by Armson USA. However, the holes on the top of this replica's frame don't allow it to fit. The holes aren't big enough for the screws, they don't align with the screw holes on the sight, and they don't provide enough room on the underside to clear the cylinder. So I bored out one of the holes and countersunk it, and that one screw is enough to hold the OEG securely in the sighting trench. Now, make no mistake, OEGs are technologically obsolete, but it's low profile, doesn't require batteries, projects a very large dot, and the stock can fold right over it, so I'm finding it's actually pretty useful, and just fun for that retro touch. Now, speaking of the parts themselves, the gun is built to a generally very high material quality standard. The steel parts are the shroud, stock, and drum, exactly as on the real thing, treated with either a real phosphate finish or a convincing substitute. It's not an extraordinarily durable finish, as you can see from the scratches, but it looks great. The frame is aluminum, which surprised me, as it also has the same finish as the steel. There aren't any thin areas here, and the design provides additional support from the steel drum, so it seems plenty durable. The muzzle nut is aluminum as well. The controls, trigger, and other small parts are aluminum with a really nice milled surface finish, and don't show any noticeable wear after about 1,000 cycles. The furniture and cylinder inside the drum are plastic, and it's actually the cylinder being plastic that accounts for this being significantly lighter than the real thing. It appears to be nylon rather than ABS or other cheaper material, and it doesn't scratch or gouge easily. And lastly, the barrel is polycarbonate, likely to comply with Chinese laws. This wouldn't normally be a problem for functionality, however, the barrel provides structural support for the shroud. It's definitely a weakness for an otherwise very tough design, because anything that hits or bends the shroud puts all that stress on a plastic barrel. I should note that the barrel wasn't black when I received it. In fact, all the plastic on the gun came in bright orange, the barrel was translucent red, and the muzzle nut was anodized red. So, the plastic was recolored by soaking it in black RIT dye at about 160 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 10 minutes, then lightly spray painted with satin black spray to achieve solid coverage. The muzzle nut was soaked in greased lightning to strip the anodization down to bare metal, and then sprayed black. And the polycarbonate barrel was also sprayed black. Let's talk a little more about that barrel, because it has a big impact on performance for this gun. With no inner barrel, performance using the Tanaka shell type is pretty bad. CO2 shells are pretty much mandatory, and even then the range is low. With APS shells, the barrel is about 3mm too short to reach them, and that wide cylinder gap bleeds out pressure during firing, which degrades performance, and it can even cause wads to get stuck in the barrel. So to fix these power issues, the first step is picking a shell type to optimize for. If you want to use Tanaka, PPS, Mad Bull, or Shogun shells, you'll want to install an inner barrel to maximize the power, as you can see on Tanaka or PPS shotguns. But frankly, the APS shells are much more impressive in this gun, so for those, you'll want to reduce the cylinder gap. The easiest way to do this is to trim down the shelf on the barrel that determines how far it can screw in. Removing 2.5mm will allow the barrel to seat that much closer to the shells and get a much better seal. We took a slightly different approach and made a composite aluminum and steel barrel from scratch. This eliminates the cylinder gap while also addressing the durability issue. We do sell these barrels through our team page in the description and ship worldwide, so send us a message if you want one. The new barrel and APS shells make this thing a monster of a shotgun. With APS X power shells and 11.2 gram BBs sandwiched between a pair of paper shot cards, the gun chronographs at about 300 FPS. Even better, because of the tight spread and high power, the gun is very capable of range. Using heavier BBs doesn't seem to reduce the muzzle velocity much, so with 32s and homemade wads, I can easily hit a man-sized target at 100 to 150 feet. The trigger is light enough that rapid fire is doable, and because it retains the shells, there's no need for a shell catcher picking them up later. While the reload process is slow and clumsy, the 12-shot capacity in such a compact package means reloading in combat is less critical. That said, while it is small and lightweight, the cylinder is pretty awkward when carrying it on a sling, so it's not as convenient as something like a short 870 in that regard. It's really best suited to carrying as a primary weapon. So overall, with the furniture recolored and the metal optimized barrel, it has quickly become my favorite shell ejecting shotgun. While undeniably clunky to load and reload, the 12-shot capacity is great, and the look and feel are fantastic. Every shot showcases the distinctive 1-2 of the cylinder clunking into place followed by the shell firing, and the loaded cylinder has enough mass to feel it torquing with each trigger pull. It's compact and fairly lightweight, coming in at just over 1.5 feet long folded, and a little over 5 pounds when fully loaded with APS shells. And best of all, since it contains its shells until manually unloaded, it circumvents the hassle of needing a shell catcher to use a shell ejecting shotgun in an outdoor environment. So the question is it worth it? Well, that really depends on the price you can get it for and your tolerance for shell-fed shotguns. Make no mistake, this is a very good replica with significant use of steel parts and generally really high build quality. Bear in mind, you'll still need to make changes if you want to optimize for a particular shell type, but it can still function in stock form, and frankly, I'd take this over anything with a shell catcher for outdoor play. So if you're looking for a practical and effective shell-fed shotgun and are willing to stomach the generally high price and general hassle and annoyance of shell ejecting shotguns to begin with, I'd wholeheartedly recommend this over an APS Cam 870 or any of the PPS guns. Personally, I'm very happy with what I got, and I'll be even happier if they become more available to others. And that about wraps up this review. So, hope you found this useful, and as always, thanks for watching.